Well, here we are. Last week we talked about commodities that are driving our industry. Today we're going to pull back the proverbial curtain and talk about all the commodities that are high shippers in 2023 to lead us into 2024. And welcome to Data Day, my friends, on Sales Chatter. So we just got a notification that our LinkedIn is having issues. Got the little not really sure button up top. So for all of you that are on LinkedIn watching this live, I do apologize. If you can hear me, switch over to YouTube. Today, last week when we were on the show, we had this idea and it's come to fruition. And I love the fact because today we're going to talk about the commodities that are shipping at higher levels in 2023. And what does that mean for you, the sales rep? So the way we look at it is it means that if we're shipping in 2023, probably these commodities will be shipping in 2024 to give you a better idea as to what products are moving and where you might want to start selling. So to all of you manufacturers out there that are creating those products, we apologize because your phone calls are about to increase. So here is the team as usual for a Wednesday. We've got Jeff Dickinson and Dean Croke, and Dean is in Grumpy Pete right now getting a few repairs. So if you hear a little bit of vroom, vroom, in the background, just let me know if you want me to do the sound effects all morning, Dean.
No, don't.
You're right. Good to be with you guys.
Good to be with you too. Good to be with you too. So, gentlemen. Okay, so here, and Dean, you looked at the chart. I didn't look at the chart. So, Jeff, what do you think the biggest commodity in 2023 was?
Furniture.
Oh,
see, I would have said that too. Yeah, I would have said that too. Now we're gonna, Dean, what's the answer?
Oh,
well, furniture was actually the lowest in terms of volume, but motor vehicle parts are right up the top. So, but I would have thought that, Jeff, because the highest number of imports in containers are always furniture by like a factor of 3x plastic products. So we bring in a lot of furniture. Yeah, so I would have always gravitated towards that. But then I thought, well, single family homes are way down. Maybe we're just not, we're not selling and moving. Maybe that's a big part of it. I suspect that's the case. So, yeah, motor vehicle parts, household appliances, steel. But I think to set the stage, guys, this has been, if you remember back to the start of the pandemic, we talked about a bifurcated market where when some cities went into lockdown, they stopped producing stuff, but they started consuming more. So you had this imbalance. Yes. And what that meant is if you're a truckload carrier that were running 100 loads in and 100 loads out, suddenly you had 100 loads in, maybe more, but nothing coming out. And you had this imbalance on some major freight lanes. And it's the same thing that's happening with commodities because we're seeing a real imbalance because of the general economy, people's buying preferences, demand is slowing. We're not building as many single-family homes, so we're not buying as much furniture. So there's lots of things sort of going on. I mean, the flip side of that, Jeff, is household appliances are very high. So maybe that's we are buying more because we're not moving. Maybe we're spending more money on things around us. Around our home.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So
which could have been why furniture was so up in the market 2 years ago, because now people have replaced their furniture. Now they're looking at their appliances and kind of doing that flip, right?
Yeah, but you know something too? I mean, I would think if they're going to upgrade their appliances, but they're not going to move, why wouldn't they upgrade their furniture to bring some, to make it look
maybe they already have.
Yeah.
Well, true too.
Right. True. So the way, like, if we remember back when COVID first started, when we were talking, furniture was skyrocketing because people had to equip a home office, right? Yes. And then they probably just don't want a desk in a room. Now they want a bookshelf, or they want a couch, or they want a TV, or they want to, all these kind of things. So I think we've done that over COVID. And now, I mean, well, I can tell you from somebody who's purchased new appliances a couple of years ago, I'm finding they're already crapping out. Like 7 years ago, we bought washers and dryers, and we've replaced 2 components in the washer already.
Already.
Like they just don't make stuff
Yeah.
the way they used to, right? Like you think of this phone right here. Yeah, super powerful, but you drop it and the whole screen smashes. Where and you guys will remember this, but when we had our first phone, which is the white brick phone, you could drop that sucker down a dozen flight of stairs, pick it up, and
It's a
you wouldn't even
weapon.
lose the call.
Yeah,
You wouldn't even
bag
know what
phone.
happened.
Remember the bag phone with the strap?
Oh
You
yeah,
could drop that off a 2-story building and it still worked.
Yeah.
you know, my wife and I just watched this. I think it was like the most amazing '90s and '80s and 2000s, and they were talking about when the first car phone came out, and it was the equivalent of like $2,000, and it weighed almost 100 pounds, and they're literally bringing me right back to when I started in logistics, because I had one of those mounted in my trunk with the big, like, I don't even know if it was a battery pack or if that's just the size of the computer they needed for this phone to work, right beside your console, and then you just kind of like
Giant ass antenna.
it's got the cord on it while you're in your car, and it was like the best thing since sliced bread. But they were going through that, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like, right? Like it's crazy how that transformation happened. But yeah, like you can drop that phone down 12 flights of stairs and it wouldn't even break. You wouldn't even lose the call. You could be underground, you wouldn't lose the call. And now I lose the call when I'm 1 block away. They can put a man on the moon and time the landing with the precision of a fraction of a second, but I can't get a phone call a block from my house. You know what I mean? Like, it's crazy. But okay, so Dean.
So Dan, throw up the second slide I sent you, Dan. We'll dive into the commodities second. Let's throw up the other one. And Jason Miller's truckload ton mile index.
Oh, okay. I didn't. Hold on just a sec.
All right.
Hold on just a sec.
Because that helps set the stage for where we're at and explains why we're seeing such a variance across different commodities. Because Jason was gracious enough to help me zero in on the database, the FRED database, the Federal Reserve database, and pull some of this data. So this is publicly available data that's on the screen now.
Okay, so Dean, that screen, the one that's on the screen now is the only one I got, actually.
Okay, there were 2 slides in the PowerPoint, but anyway, so let me speak to it. The Jason Miller's truckload ton mile index came out this week. He published it yesterday, in fact, and it's for September's data. So remember, the truckload ton mile index that he produces is, in my opinion, the most accurate truckload demand indicator, because it's pure truckload based on 41 freight generating commodities. It's on a 45-day lag, but directionally it's been very accurate over the last 3 years in particular, while most indices have been all over the place and not really reflecting what's going on in the market. So in September, slight increase from August, down about 1.1% compared to this time last year. Most important data point from the truckload ton mile index is ton miles were up 1.6% in September from September 2019. That's a really important data point in terms of measuring where we are right now, because this is sort of a blend of contract and spot freight, probably predominantly contract freight, given it's the majority of freight being moved. So what you're seeing is, and we've talked about similarities with 2019 as being a fairly flat freight market, very soft freight market, which is similar to what we've got now, slightly above 2019 levels. So again, it lines up pretty much with how we've seen the market. His data point in his LinkedIn post, again, he said we're moving along a trough. He doesn't see a scenario where volumes increase anytime soon. I tend to agree with him. We're seeing some flatness in volumes. We saw a lot of spot market volume decrease last week, going against seasonal trend. Really caught me by surprise. Instead of volumes going up, they dropped about 20% week over week in the spot market. And when you look at the acceptance ratio of carriers, carriers are accepting about 96.5% of all loads tendered to them by shippers. So rejection rates are at historical lows. I've not seen rejection rates this low for this long. And again, so what that means is if carriers are accepting nearly everything they get, very little is falling through routing guides into the spot market, hence spot market volumes are low. So that's sort of the scenario we've got there. But if you want to throw that slide back up, Dan, if you think about where we're at and why the market is soft, the middle data point there, the red line, is the most important one because it's manufacturing. And manufacturing is down about 2% year over year. Manufacturing accounts for, it's the physical goods, Industrial production includes services as well as physical goods, whereas manufacturing is the what we haul in the trucking industry. So being down 2% year over year, that's significant. It accounts for about 65% of ton miles in trucking. So that's sort of the net of where we're at on, across the board. But if you look at either end of the chart, you can see that if you've got an exposure to motor vehicle and auto parts, volumes are up. But if you've got an exposure to furniture in the other end of the scale, you can see volumes would be down. And
furniture's down 10% year over year, the highest drop out of all of them.
Wow.
Yeah. So this is publicly available data from the Fred database. This is why I think you're seeing such a softer freight market overall. I've talked to truckers all year, and guys that are hauling over-dimensional machinery have been doing exceptionally well. Carriers that have an exposure to flatbed, just open deck lumber, not so good. Whereas some in the specialized part of the industry doing very well. So I think it's been a mixed year for a lot of carriers, but the general synopsis is that some commodities are hot, but Dan, not the majority. There's only a few that are hot, but they're not big movers of the freight market needle. And that's why I think you're seeing manufacturing down 2%. Most of them are pretty flat to down when we look across the 41 freight producing commodities. Not a lot of joy there, which is not good, particularly this time of the year, because normally things are pumping right now as we head into Thanksgiving. The fact that spot market volumes dropped nearly 20% last week, and we saw load to truck ratios for flatbed, dry van, and reefer, the lowest I've seen in 7 years for this week. Normally they're going up. They dropped dramatically. When you start to see flatbed load to truck ratio of 4.95 loads per truck, that tells you how soft the market is, because when homes were being built at the record levels in December 2021, load to truck ratio was 100 to 1, 100 loads to a truck. Now that includes overposting, but load to truck ratio is a really good indicator of a market behavior. When capacity is tight, load to truck ratio is high. When it's loose, load to truck ratio is low. So the fact that you see load to truck ratio like 1.65 loads per truck in flatbed, that's historically low. And I think it underpins how soft the spot market is. And we're still seeing carriers exit. So we're not seeing that inflection point just yet. We saw a number of carriers enter the market. So a lot of carriers reactivating, which is a really surprising data point. But busy time of the year, maybe they're having reactivating an authority, getting their trucks rolling to make some money in this quarter. But I think the bigger issue is going to be first quarter next year. I think that's when you're going to start to see capacity exit the industry in fairly significant numbers. We did see a data point from a colleague. He was talking to a New York City private equity fund who has a very big exposure to truckload carriers. And since Q2, they've been running 103 to 105 ORs, operating ratios. So losing money at a fairly good clip. The average fleet size was 50 to 150 carriers in that portfolio. Now, you might say, well, they're not spot market carriers. In fact, they are spot market carriers.
Yeah, especially the 50 trucks.
They're moving.
Well, the numbers pan out this way. 5 to 40 trucks predominantly have head haul outbound from a small town shipper, and they use the spot market to go home periodically. Whereas the 50 to 150 fleets are too big for the hometown shipper, but not big enough to win a big RFP off Jeff, right, with a big shipper. So what we found was Jason Miller did this study, and we published it at FreightWaves about 5 years ago, and it was called Who's Hauling Spot Freight? And it really confounded us because we thought it would be mostly owner-operators, small fleets. Well, it turns out that the data was exactly 40 to 150 truck fleets haul the most spot market freight. So if they've been running 103 to 105% operating ratios, which means they're losing money, and if they've been doing that for the 2 quarters of the second half of this year, you can see why the market's in serious trouble, I think, because that aligns with the dropping of spot market rates. And if we don't see, we've always forecast that rates will be flat. I don't know if you remember the start of the year. I thought they'd end the year flat. I think that's where they're going to end. But I don't know they're going to move much more up or down going into the new year. I just think it's a flat market, not a lot of movement. There'll be some ups and downs. But when you look at our long-term forecast, we don't see a rate inflection until the spring. And it's like May or June before we see anything moving back up above where they are now. But they drop down another 8 to 9 cents a mile in April next year. So this is a really difficult time for anybody buying capacity, because capacity is going to be exiting. You're going to have to really look after your carriers, that the ones that are going to stay. The ones that are struggling they'll chase the market down as much as they can to generate cash flow. Because as we said on our show, I think a couple of weeks ago, they're trying to generate as much money as they can to pay their insurance bill, their fuel bill, and
apparently something's wrong in the back of your truck there,
that's the rattle gun on my suspension. I had to go to
sounding like Grumpy Pete's angry over
I had to go to a knee surgery. I had to go to a knee surgery appointment this morning, and I thought I'd multitask and drop the truck into the shop next door to get a service.
See, remember we were talking off air about how productive Dean is, Jeff?
Yeah.
See that? Drives Grumpy Pete to his knee surgery appointment, and he drops Grumpy Pete off. The guys, they look outside, they see Dean climbing down from a 4.5 foot high truck. They're like, no wonder. No wonder his knee's not doing what it should be doing. But so, Dean, I've got a couple of questions for you. So, number one, just for everybody watching and listening,
right?
Just understand, when Dean talks about operating ratios, it's a little bit different, and you're probably wondering 103%. What the heck is that? So a carrier, an asset-based carrier, runs their operating ratio. So if it's at like 88%, they're making 12% profit.
Right.
So just that's a very simple way of discussing operating ratio. So when Dean says 103%, they're losing 3% pretty much per mile every trip they run. So, or 3% for every lane they run, or every shipment they deliver. So just so you guys understand where Dean was coming about with operating ratio, and just so, because that probably made the rest of what Dean said, if you didn't understand operating ratio, it kind of made what Dean said a little confusing. So hopefully that's aligned it. So I have that was nice. Like at the Oscars when they start the music, when it's time for you to get off stage.
I got a follow-up to that, Dan.
Go for it, Jeff.
Yeah. Another thing, that's a key element about OR, the operating ratio, is that when you select your carriers to bring them on board as a service provider, you want to look at their OR. You really do, because the higher the OR,
about it,
the higher the risk, because you never know what's going to happen, compared to the lower ORs, like the most profitable carriers out there that are running high 80s, low 90s right now. When you start getting over that 100 mark, they're struggling. They really are struggling.
And one more piece to that, everybody. Carriers' operating ratios are always fairly high for what you would think.
Yeah.
Right. So just understand that, like, if somebody's operating at a 91, 92, they're actually doing pretty well.
Yes.
In 88, they're doing very well. So don't look at that as if it's like a margin as a broker that you would put 20% on the margin, hypothetically, right? Like you would, if you go and ask your boss or the owner of your company, what's our OR? It won't be 25% just because you make 25% on loads, because they have buildings, they have employees, they have non-revenue generating pieces of the business, right?
It's called the SG&A.
There you go. So just, and this isn't a logistics financial show, but just understand that this is like your margins, or the margins as a broker, if you own a brokerage company or whatever, it's not the same thing when you're talking about OR for carriers, okay?
Correct.
So to put some numbers around that, Dasky, the largest flatbed carrier in the country, just came out with their third quarter earnings. Their OR was about, I think, at 95% thereabouts.
So they're actually doing pretty good.
And they had a stellar year so far. They've done exceptionally well, really well-run fleet. Heartland Express from Iowa has historically been one of the best-run companies, the most profitable, 85% ORs traditionally. It's up over 90 at the moment. I think it was in the Yahoo Finance had it at 96.6, but that's not a reflection, I think, of how the business is run. They had a couple of acquisitions, and I think there's some synergies they're still trying to work through. So when you read about operating ratios, it's a really good way to figure out how much money a company is making relative to their cost base.
And Dean, a 96.8 operating ratio in today's day and age is a friggin' fantastic OR. It's amazing, right? Like so yeah. And then so here's my big question to you guys. And I was asked this question, and I want to see if I answered it right, because I thought I did, and now I'm second guessing myself. So, is it a fact that volumes are down or more carriers are in the market? Because when we look at the data, we see more imports coming in. So we still have an influx of imports coming in, but rates are going down. So what is your answer to that? Is it a fact that freight has slowed down, or a fact that there's so many carriers in, even if freight has not slowed down, there's too many carriers? So the load to truck ratio is flipping because of the amount of carriers.
So it's both. It's both, Dan. It's probably more. We're still having this hangover effect from too many carriers. So I think if I had to call one or the other, I would say we've still got excess capacity in the market. Absolutely. But demand is declining. We've got some pretty difficult year-over-year comps, right? Because last year we're still coming off the COVID pandemic highs. That's why I always go back to Jason Miller's chart, where he looks at this compared to 2019 and 2018 as being our most realistic years for what I would now call a fairly normal freight year. So we're still coming off some fairly big highs, but demand. So if you think about how much capacity have we got relative to 2018, 2019, a lot more. So remember, for hire capacity in the long haul sector doubled from the start of the pandemic to the end of last year. But if freight volumes are comparable to 2019, and we've still got a lot of capacity, we lost 132,000 carriers in the last 12 months, but gained 126,000. So the leakage was very slow, but the leakage was higher in the long haul capacity because the carriers that left and then the new carriers that came back into the shorter haul regional dedicated final mile space. So it's not a one-for-one exchange. So it's what's really hard to get a fix on capacity, because if you look at the total capacity, it's growing. Like the total number of trucks on the road is always growing, but it's certain sectors that are really struggling, and it's the long-haul spot market sector that is the most exposed to volatility in both price and cost on fuel, and it's the quickest to enter and the quickest to exit. And they are the ones that are exiting now. And when they exit in a sufficient number, it starts to move the national needle in the months that follow. That's generally how it works. And so I'm just waiting for the rattle gun to hit my suspension again.
Yeah. So if we go back to this chart, Dean, right, and we're talking about long haul, truckload long haul, that would be more in this red section under manufacturing, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay. And then if we are talking, because also when we're talking about motor vehicle parts, typically that's dedicated freight. A lot of that is ran by the same people every week or every day, day in, day out. That's more on the dedicated.
Correct.
Household appliances, which is the orange, which is up 6% this year. So I'm kind of explaining it for all the people that might not be watching live, so they can't see it. So automotive, motor parts and automotive is up 7% year over year. Household appliances is up 6%, and steel is up 3.5%. Now that in correlation with machinery, which is down 3.7%, which is typically what flatbeds will haul, you kind of got one side of the business going up while the other side's dropping, right? And so I would say that kind of evens it out. So maybe you're flat depending on what you're hauling in the market.
Right.
What does that manufacturing down 2%? What does that average out to volumes a year, Dean, or volumes a month?
Oof. I don't know, Dan. I'd have to. Jason Miller's got some numbers. I can't pull them off the top of my head. I know he talks about total truckloads in the course of a year at about 225 million. But I'd have to ask him. We've got him on the show on 12/19,
Good.
the last week of the year, and that's a good discussion. I can ask him then. He'd be able to have a good swag at what that translates to in truckloads.
Oh, hell yeah.
But to be honest, they're gonna be such big numbers. I'm not sure you can, make a meaningful, judgment about what that means to someone that's selling capacity at a regional or market.
Well, and I guess where I was going with it, Dean, was, let's say that 2% equates to 100,000 loads a year, just hypothetically, right? And then if we look at it and we say, and right now we've got 2 times the amount of carriers in, because we're, so now you've got a loss of 100,000 loads plus twice the amount of carriers. You do that math, it's an average of, 3 loads a week per carrier kind of thing is what we're losing. So that was more of like where my math was going with it, even though I'm not very good at math and I needed my calculator for all of that. But
something what I found really interesting with that chart up there, you had 9 specific verticals covering pretty much the industry when you really think about that, and 3 of which are in the positive and 6 are in the negative. That if that doesn't tell you a story in and of itself, I don't know. The other thing that's true too with the furniture industry, a lot of the furniture is moved by fleets. They do a lot of transfers from facility to end user to malls to wherever they may be going. So that is also a lot of dedicated movement in the furniture industry as well.
But to be down 10%.
I know that's
an enormous number considering it's the number one import in North America.
Right. Right. So what I'm looking at when you look at the furniture being down 10%, and a lot of that is dedicated, look what it's doing to the dedicated fleets out there.
Well, and then the dedicated fleets that don't have that business look to the spot market to replace that business.
Exactly.
Right. So
exactly. So they're hurting. And to Dean's point, a lot of these carriers are moving to the super regional delivery because it's more profitable.
Right. Yeah. So Dan, I put some numbers around this for a discussion yesterday. We had on a media pitch. We built. So if you talk about single family homes, right? I work on 3 flatbeds and 1 dry van for a single family home. And
per home.
In the last 12 months, we built 10.7 million single family homes. That translates into 32 million flatbed loads, of which 6.4 would be carried in the spot market. Now, the number that I think is the most important, if you compared to the peak of single-family home building in late 2021, the volume of homes has dropped 27% since then. That translates into 1.4 million fewer flatbed loads per month. That's a lot of flatbed loads.
That's a lot of
contract and spot.
Huge amount.
And that's just flatbed loads. Like, so these are, I struggle to put my head around what does 1.4 million loads mean. It's like a lot of loads every week, and you say that can't be right. But when you go out and look on the roads, there's a lot of freight moving still, but a lot more trucks than loads still.
Okay, so if we divide that by 30, that's like 46,666 loads a day.
That's unreal.
Yeah,
that's just disappeared from the market.
That's just crazy.
Now here's the thing, okay, and here's where you start. This is where I think data becomes such a cool game, because it's now we've got this one data point. What was it like in 2018, 19? Right? Like, and what created the housing boom in 2021 right in the middle of COVID? But and like, so these are all the things I start asking myself to go down this rabbit hole and continue going. But to talk about 46,666 loads a day, like, I'm sure every logistics salesperson out there would be like, give me 1% of that, just 1% of that, and I'm like a rich man for the rest of my life. So it's I don't know if Jeff just started taking a nap there or what he's doing.
No, I'm looking at this. What's really unbelievable,
Jeff,
that's 1,941 loads an hour. That's 1,941 loads an hour in a 24-hour day.
That's crazy.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
So compared to 2019, guys, we built 57,000 more homes in September just gone, and compared to 2018, 88,000 more homes. So we're still building more homes in comparison to those busy years per month, but we've got far more trucks on the market, right, chasing that freight. So
chasing the same amount of, a little bit more freight, but we probably got triple the amount of trucks than we had back then.
Oh yeah,
we have a lot of trucks still. Yeah,
a lot of trucks.
Yeah. And a lot of guys have still got trucks that they paid triple for, and they're trying to finance a note now with it on a truck that's worth a third of what it was when they bought it. So they've really got to drive the wheels off it to make the fuel bill, the wages, the insurance. Like, it's a tough time for a lot of carriers out there.
Well, you don't want to drive the wheels off the truck. It's going to cost them more money to run it.
I've literally
sounds like Dean's getting his wheels ripped off. It sounds like, you know what it sounds like? It sounds like Dean's got rims on Grumpy Pete and he's at a Puff Daddy concert and they're getting stolen or something.
The funny thing is, I said to the guys, I said, hey, I'm doing a podcast in half an hour. Can you keep the noise down? Like, so I think they amped it up on me. They've hit the gun on every rusty bolt they can find.
Podcasting, let's ramp it up.
That's when they're looking at you, Dean, going, yeah. We'll keep the noise down. Don't you worry about it, Mr. Podcaster.
No problem.
We'll keep the noise down for you. Boys, pull that truck up close. Pull that truck up close. That's hilarious. So, okay, so we've got, I mean, obviously right now, for anyone watching, listening, your household appliances are up 6%. Your steel's up 3.5%. Your industrial production's down 0.5%. Manufacturing, one of the largest markets, is down 2%. Wood's down 2%. Electrical and appliances is down 2%, which is interesting because household appliances is up. And then machinery is down 3.7%. So we've got like some massive movements. And I'm going to echo what Jeff said, you know, just to see 3 industries out of 9 up and the other, and not even up huge, like 7%, I guess, for motor parts is a big increase considering because, and that's probably more along the lines of every company trying to get electric vehicles out nowadays. And then, you know, to have 6 of them down and especially furniture down 10%, that's crazy.
I want to make a point here. You know, when it comes to auto part industry, breaking into OEM tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, to get in there to try to move that freight, that's a difficult task.
It's a very difficult task.
It's not easy. So even though that's prosperous and it's moving and it's up 7%, very tough to get into it. So don't put all your eggs in one basket and say, I'm going after auto parts. There's a lot of strategy, you know, and tactics that need to be taken place in order to have that shot, but it doesn't come overnight. It's tough.
Yeah. You know, Jeff, you make a valid point, right? Because a lot of auto parts is milk runs, right? A lot of it is milk runs. And I remember when I was trying, I used to do a lot of business with Magna. And getting into the Magna business was one of the most difficult things I ever did because they gave me one little piece. And it was like, you're trying to put numbers to it. And they're like, oh my God, you're like 30% more expensive. Well, it's because the other person's doing a milk run. I'm doing LTL. So you're comparing apples to oranges and it'll never work. So just, you know, understand that if you're looking at auto parts. And I know, you know, a show like this that shows you auto parts up 7%. It's like, I'm going to start selling auto parts today. And it just doesn't, I mean, no, I mean, listen, you might find a company that's in auto parts of some which way, shape, or form, and they'll be like, sure, you know, here, try this. But to get, like Jeff said, to get in with the like OEM, the ones that are actually moving the volume, takes a long time. You know, I'd say you'd probably, looking at this graph, you'd be better to do household appliances and some kind of steel.
You know something, Dean, I got to ask you a question. If you could bring this next week, can you break the categories down for auto parts? And what I'm kind of gearing towards is aftermarket, because that's a different type of industry that you can tap into compared to OEM tier 1, 2, and 3.
Good point.
Good segment, Jeff. 100%.
I'm on it. Yeah.
Okay. That'll be next week's show. What? We already got it. Dean's going to come to you next week from a lift.
Here's what it looks like.
Nice. I love
it. What is that? My fingers home? Jesus.
I've got my laptop paired to my phone, sitting on the dash with a battery pack charging it. So So
I'm surprised you don't got a green screen in the back of Grumpy Pete yet.
There you go. No,
I
like
did.
It looks good that way. It does.
Could have,
Yeah. I love it.
Great show.
All right, gents. Anything to close up? What do you guys got going on this next week?
It's Thanksgiving next week, right? So we'll be
Oh,
coming to you. We'll be coming to you on the busiest travel day of the year, right? Wednesday.
Yeah, it's the
That's gonna be interesting.
22nd next week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'll
Wednesday.
be off the road. I won't be driving anywhere. People are crazy.
Good to take care of yourself.
Yes. You know, it's and these travel times, you're watching a lot of companies accelerate, right? This ship lug. I don't know if you guys have heard of it, but it's a company that ships your luggage for you.
Oh yeah.
You don't even have to bring it on the plane.
Yeah.
Just killing it these days because every airline's losing luggage left, right, and center. These companies are just totally killing it. It's crazy. But you know what? It's I have a buddy of mine who travels every week, and he's like, Dan, I don't even like if I have to go for a week. He goes, I will literally like fold underwear in, so it's like kind of those
Yeah.
that you put in water and it expands kind of thing. He goes like, I'll literally use the vacuum and suck the air out of it, and I'll pack my bag to a point where I don't have to check it. He goes, because I don't know how many times they've lost my luggage. My brother-in-law flew to Switzerland or Iceland, and he had huge meetings out there, and they lost his luggage.
Ooh.
And so he's in jogging pants and a t-shirt that says "My daughter knows best." I don't need Google. I just asked my daughter or something, and my daughter knows best. And he had to go to meetings in this. Yeah, and he had to go because they lost his luggage, and he literally had like an hour between landing and getting to where he was, and he was like, I expected to change in the airport or in, when I get to but yeah, so a lot of these different companies are going to make a killing in the next week, because I think about Pearson Airport, how much these Canadian airlines and US airlines lose luggage. And then I start thinking about the busiest travel day in North America coming up next week. And I'm like, oh yeah, people are going to make a killing.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
My son's shipping his golf clubs. Yeah, my son's shipping his golf clubs today from our local golf course to Florida. He's going down there for Thanksgiving with his girlfriend and their family. And there's a company that ships them. They have all the packaging already at all the golf clubs. And you just take it over. And like, get this, it was only $60 to send golf clubs from Essex, Massachusetts, all the way to Florida. I don't know how you make money at that, but
that's pretty
good. Dean, think about it. It's going to cost you $50 to put it in oversized anyways. When you get on the airplane, and then you got to carry it. Then you got to go to like for the extra $10, I might take it.
Yeah, but also there's a high probability that they're going to be bent and thrown all over the place as well, compared to
nicely packaged and shipped.
There you go.
Yeah, all about the packaging, boys.